Welcome to the Rise to the Challenge podcast. Joined today, he's a real estate entrepreneur and podcast host. It's Gabe Petersen. How are you doing today, Gabe?
Alex, yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
We're so excited to have you on the show to talk about your rise to the challenge. What we like to do with all of our guests is go right to the beginning. Talk about where you're from and what were you involved in growing up?
Where I'm from and what I was involved in. All right, so I'm from Washington, sunny Seattle. I'm actually from a little town called Enumclaw, which, if you're not from here, you haven't heard of it, but it's about 45 minutes southeast of Seattle. And growing up, what I was involved in, that's kind of a broad statement. So I'm going to say, growing up, if you go way back when I, grew up in church, I was really involved in that, in sports, all that jazz, and mostly just hanging out with my friends, normal childhood.
So each of those items, so going with the church, was that something that your family grew up and something that you kind of bonded with and where you guys could get together and knowing on a Sunday or whatever day you went on that you could spend that time together?
Yeah. I mean, it was both my parents grew up in the church, and so I grew up in the church, and it was more of a community thing, for me at least. They still adhere to the religious side of things. I've kind of gone my other direction, but I still, I enjoyed that upbringing, especially the community that church brings. I kind of miss that.
You talked about community and how you grew up in kind of a small town. Was that a way that everyone kind of knew what was going on in each other's lives, or you got to get to know everyone?
Yeah, I say small town. Enumclaw is small, but it is Enumclaw, and so if you go like Tacoma, Seattle, Bellevue, they're all so close to each other that it's not a small town. I mean, I grew up in million plus people living in a 50-mile radius of me, so it was not small, and but it was a good way to connect with, to create a community in those huge numbers of people that you live with.
With connecting with other people, what did that bring out of you skill wise, or something that you didn't know about yourself?
No, I mean, actually, I remember, I remember when I was graduating high school, I was applying for scholarships, and one of the scholarships, it asked, like, I can't remember what the prompt was, but the essence of it was, what did you get out of high school? And I feel like this applies to high school, and my response applies to both high school and church and everything. It's, growing up, when you're growing up in those environments, it's more of a social development than it is an academic development. I still stand behind that. The scholastic people did not like my response, but I felt I developed more socially in church and high school than I did academically, and it's just a really good, that's where you create your community in today's day and age.
Why do you feel that it's more social than scholastic or academic wise?
I mean, obviously it is scholastic because it is school. But in terms of what looking back, in terms of what I learned back then that applies to, I'm getting into iffy waters here. I should really watch my words. But what I learned, back then that applies to what I'm doing now, there's not a ton of crossover. But what I really brought through that period was, my connections, the relationships I developed, learning how to develop those relationships, that kind of thing. I felt like that was the biggest takeaway from that period of my life than learning that the United States was founded in 1776 or something like that.
I can definitely agree with that. High school for me, I think, was the opposite, where I was more focused on the academic side and not really on the socially. But when I went to college, I was still academic learning, but my social part was skyrocketing because you're living with these people 24/7. And if you can't interact with people, it's just going to be a long 4 years at college. So I think
we don't live in
so
clans
true.
anymore. So we got to have that,
Correct. And those relationships and friendships just last a long time. And you kind of get to know people differently than if we all were just driving to school and just in class and then going home. You learn more after hours, I would say, than if you're just in that classroom environment.
Yep, absolutely.
You talked about sports. What were those sports that you played?
So let's see. growing up, I mean, my parents put me in anything that you could be put in. So I did soccer, basketball, baseball, all that jazz. I remember being specifically bad at basketball. So that was not my jazz. I did do wrestling. That's kind of the thing that I enjoyed the most, and weightlifting. And then after, after high school and into college, I started into jiu-jitsu all the way through, a couple years ago, right before COVID is when I stopped that. So, started early and kept it going.
What brought you to the physical contact sports like wrestling and jiu-jitsu? I'm not weightlifting, but weightlifting kind of goes with all those in a way. What brought you to that?
It's just a lot of fun. I mean, if anybody out there, maybe you have young kids, I would highly recommend getting them into jiu-jitsu, especially because it's very, it's a good sport. It's very, contact oriented, but you're more likely not to get injured in jiu-jitsu. And it's a great sport. It's a lot of fun. You just got to try it.
There's people out there that are going to be like, oh, I can find a way to get injured in that sport. Knowing me, I'd probably definitely get injured but was there an influence, someone that you kind of inspired to be growing up, someone that motivated you?
Okay, let's see. Somebody that really motivated me when I was growing up. I mean, when I was younger, obviously my dad and the people that were closest to me. Then when I got into high school, there was a pastor that was really, I kind of looked up to him. And then I started reading I just got really into books. And so I read a bunch. I think the first like self-development quote unquote book was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And that kind of like opened my eyes. And then I just like dove into reading, and, you get mentors from anybody, any book you pick up is a mentor. And that just started to open my eyes.
With any of those individuals you talked about, is there something that they have said to you that you still utilize today?
Oof, that's a good one. Is there something they said to me that still is applicable today? I'm sure there is. I'm just racking my brain for something right now. That's I guarantee there was. It's just right now it's 5:07, which isn't that late here in Seattle, but it is. It's at the end of the day, and my brain's just not working with me. So I'm gonna have to take a pass on that one.
All good. We usually are asked, "What's that dream job?" And I always ask my guests this: what was that dream job that you were wanting?
Oh yeah, okay. So growing up, when I was really little, I wanted to be a pilot. I thought that was badass. I still think that's badass. I don't really have the eyes for it, but I think it'd be a lot of fun to learn how to fly. But then when I got into college, when I got into high school, I just started. I didn't really have a specific plan. I liked computers, and I wanted to be a lawyer. I really liked, debating and arguing essentially. And so I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I can go into that story later on, but mostly I wanted to be a pilot and then lawyer. That's kind of how it went.
See, a pilot's so cool. And I did that once, I think in college. I took a flight lessons and I'm like, this is so cool. But the requirements that like the amount of hours you have to get to finally go. So I'm like, it's too much time. I mean,
expensive.
It's at least I can say I experienced it, but maybe down the road I'll do it. But yeah, it's so much. And
yeah, I have a friend who's a helicopter pilot, and he posts his little Instagram pictures, and I'm like, man, I'm so jealous. I got to figure out how to do that.
He doesn't ask you to come along on the ride with him?
No, he lives in a different country now. So
you just got to now fly to him, basically. Just get your own plane and stuff. Yep. Let's talk about that next experience after high school with college. Where did you go? You talked about a little bit about what you were wanting to do, but how did that path take you?
Yeah, so got in college, and I had the idea, it was kind of a vague idea, like I might want to be a lawyer. It was just kind of the direction I was going because I didn't really know specifically what I wanted to do. And I, kept reading and kept getting into the kind of the path, the entrepreneurship path is kind of where I was heading. And I started to build that idea, like I can create a business, I can do something like that. But it came to the time when I needed to graduate, and I had this degree. I think I graduated degree in it was called Comparative History of Ideas. It was essentially philosophy. So you can't do anything with a philosophy degree. I graduated college and I was going to go to law school. And so I decided I should, go and spend some time with some lawyers and figure out if that's something that I actually want to do. I did that, and it didn't turn out to be a job that really, really got me going. And I knew I didn't want to go down that path. But I was kind of like, I don't know what the phrase is. I had the shit in the bag or something like that. I don't know. I had to make a decision. I had graduated, and I didn't now all of a sudden decided I didn't want to go to college. I'd already taken the LSATs, done all that stuff. I'd been accepted to law school, but I didn't want to go. So it was really that pivotal moment was really difficult. Just making the decision. Okay, this is not for me. I need to, alter my course. I need to do something different because I know I'm not going to be happy as a lawyer. So I did make the decision not to go to law school without really a backup plan. And that was, mistake number one. When you're going through life, you always have to kind of just take things as they come, especially when you realize you made a mistake and you have to pivot. If you don't have a backup plan, so what? It's life goes on. You got to keep going.
Yep.
So that's where I was. I just started getting random jobs. I installed refrigerators, and I had so many jobs. My girlfriend now, we'll be driving around town, and I'll be like, "Oh, I work there," and the list keeps going on. I feel like I worked every single business in Washington State. But yeah, so I didn't go to law school. Decided, I was just kind of floating around. A friend of mine was working at Accenture, which is a consulting firm. And he was, going out, he was flying around, looked like he was having fun based on his pictures. And so I said, shit, that sounds good. I should do that. And so I got an interview, I got hired, and I started working as a consultant. But that, again, it wasn't, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't know how to do that. But I knew I needed the job. So I took this consulting gig. At the time, I thought, I can make this work. This is something that I can really turn into a career. But I just couldn't like it. I couldn't get into it. 7 years later, I worked in that job for 7 years before I finally, made the full plunge. But that's kind of the track through college and then into my first job, quote unquote.
Did anyone try to stop you with going with philosophy? Because you hear with students, they kind of use psychology, philosophy as I don't know what I want to do, but I just need to get this degree in a way just to have something. Did anyone try to stop you to make a better decision that could benefit you longer?
They did. They tried to turn my attention to a different degree. And I think that was the wrong way to go about it because I just had no business being at college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I needed to go get experience. If I, with my future kid, that's what I'm going to tell him to do is, let's go work. Let's go do some real shit. And we don't need to get another degree. It's not going to help you. And so, yes, they did. They told me to get a degree in math, get a degree in computer science. But I was like, no, I'm going to be a lawyer. And so that's the path I took.
Well, usually it's if someone is going to be a lawyer, they know that they have extended school after, but they try to go for that easy degree or something that just gets them in the door in a way. And I feel that you got to at least do something. Like you mentioned, the backup plan, something that can back you up just in case you don't get into law school, because we all know those tests are not that easy.
Yep.
Looking back now, would you have changed your path knowing the outcome that you went through? You mentioned that you would have said maybe don't get a degree, but would you have changed your degree? Would you still have gone the no degree route? How would that look if you went back in time?
Right. Hindsight's always 2020. I feel like my life is where it should be. And I really feel like that's the case for most people. If I were to go back to myself back then, it's really hard to give yourself, advice because that guy had to make those mistakes in order to be where I am right now.
Yep.
But, it just some other, alternate world. I go back, I give him advice. I'd probably tell him, what would I tell him to do? That's a great question. I'm in real estate now. That's my career and I love it. So I'd probably tell him to just get into real estate. The problem is I wouldn't know I'd tell them to get into real estate somehow. Just start, become a realtor, anything like that, before going to college.
You mentioned that when you shadowed other lawyers or you worked with them, you didn't ended up not liking it. What was the biggest thing you remember that you did not like that kind of turned it off for you?
Their offices, definitely. It was just, there was no fun to be had in those environments. And I was 20, what was I, like 21 ish at the time, and it was just a very dreary, drab environment. And people just didn't look like they were enjoying life at these offices. And so it just kind of took me, when I thought of a lawyer, I thought of a trial lawyer. In reality, I thought of somebody up there debating the subject and all that jazz. But a lot of law is, and this is nothing against lawyers, if there's lawyers out there listening, I don't know your job, and I'm sure it's a lot better than my 21-year-old mind hadn't thought. But I went there, and it was just, the environment did not, it just didn't seem like something I could get behind. It was a lot of, the person I was following wasn't much older than me, and she was doing a lot of case review, and that's literally, you're just staring at a book. Ooh. And just it didn't look like a lot of fun to me.
Do you feel the media or TV shows, movies kind of overhype what a lawyer is? And then when people think, oh, I want to be like that, but then they get into it and it has nothing to do with exactly what it is?
So actually, no, because it would be, being a lawyer does sound fun if you're a trial lawyer. And I'm sure there's aspects of, once you really get good at being a lawyer and you really understand the law and you're able to apply it in different situations, I'm sure it like any skill, once you get good at it, it's fun. And so, the media, that they got to make a story out of it. But yeah, I still think being a lawyer could be fun. It just, at the time, it wasn't the right decision for me, and I couldn't go down that path.
Would you go back to it now?
No, definitely not.
Definitely not.
No, I love where I am, and I made the right decision back then. It's just, I'm not saying anything bad against being a lawyer. I do feel like it is a good profession to pursue.
You talked about your first job out of college was that consulting job. Give a little background about what it was, what were you doing, and what was a positive that you got out of that experience?
Yeah. So consulting is a good career, in that you get a lot of breadth of experience. And so you get to go to all these different companies. So I was doing business analysis and project management, and I would go to, I don't know how many clients I had, like tons of different clients, like Microsoft, Brooks, all these different clients up here in the Seattle area, mostly. I would go and I would work on a project at their company, and then I'd, 6 months, a year later, I'd go to a different project at a different company. And so in the course of the 7 years I was, working as a consultant, I got a lot of breadth of experience, and I got to see a lot of different environments, and different businesses and how they function.
What was the challenging part about that job?
The challenging part was the movement, actually. And that's really what I didn't like about it is, I mentioned earlier, growing up, I really liked the community aspect of church, of school. And when you're a consultant, you do move projects often. And what that does is it just breaks up relationships every time you have to move. And so you can't really create a home base. And I didn't like that aspect of the job. And I didn't really like corporate in general, because there's not, you're working at a multi-billion-dollar company, and those type of companies are not nimble. They move very slowly, and they turn very slowly. And so you can't make your own, independent decisions very, very often. And I wanted that, and that's where I ended up, is entrepreneurship.
How long were you there for before you moved to your next path in your career?
It took me 7 years as a consultant to finally, take the leap of faith into my next step.
Was there ever a time before that final year that you're like, maybe I should just leave already?
Oh yeah, no, I didn't want to be doing consulting probably year 2 or 3. I knew that it wasn't the path for me, but economics are, the need for security is stronger than the need for creative expression or whatever else it is. And I didn't know how to make money. And so I was making a decent amount of money as a consultant, and I was kind of, the golden handcuffs. I couldn't leave without money coming in. Although I did end up leaving without much money coming in, but I just got to the point where I had to make the leap.
Sometimes entrepreneurs are always starting up their business during the time they are working. Did you ever think about starting it earlier than transitioning to that next step? Or did you start while you were being a consultant?
I did multiple different things while I was a consultant, and that's the hard part, because your mind can only focus on one thing well. And if you can't be a great employee and run a side business, there's so many people that run their business and have their side hustles. If they do it well, good on them, like props to you. I was not able to do it well, and I was kind of had one foot in each camp. But I did. I flipped a house. I started the e-commerce business. House e-commerce. I did digital marketing for a client. So I had a whole bunch of stuff going on the side, up to the point where I left.
Did you feel you were being overworked, like you were doing too much, didn't have enough hours in the day to be able to do everything? Because I'm assuming the consultant job, it's on the hours of your clients, and then you're doing these other things after hours.
Yeah, definitely. I was stretched too thin. And that's another reason why, if you're thinking about doing, if you want to make a career move, I just highly recommend making the move all at once. If you need to have a financial runway, then work at your job, and until you have that runway, that financial runway ahead of you, then just make a clean cut jump into the next step. So you have that. You don't have to do both at once, because I wasn't able to do it very well.
Did it take a toll on your personal life in a way?
Yeah, just because you don't have a lot of time, and my mind was always focused on something. And relationships are always experienced in the moment, they're experienced here and now, and so it's difficult to be here when you're constantly thinking about other things.
Did you feel that you may had a support system or someone that could support you and help you kind of guide you to that next stage? Or during these times that were troubling, where you're working as a consultant, plus you're doing your side hustles at the same time, did you feel that you were being supported at all?
Yeah, I mean, you're never going to get all of the support that you feel you need, because everybody is also living their own life. And so I was supported in the realm that I was existing. And so in my job, I was supported in my job. And in entrepreneurship, that's the hard part. Unless you have other entrepreneurs in your life, you really are not going to be supported. And that's just, so you need to have a mentor. It took me a while to get one of those. I wish I'd done that earlier. You need to have a mentor, or just be working alongside other people who are trying to do the same sort of thing, because then you can get that support system. Because unless somebody's also creating a business, they're not going to have they're not going to be able to relate really to what you're doing.
How did you find the knowledge to know how to be flipping houses, e-commerce website during this time, even though your college times was completely in a different industry?
I mean, just like you do anything, I mostly Google. You can learn to make any business out there. The information's out there. You just go out there, pick it up, and the important part is just to take action. Once you take action, you just figure out the first 2 steps you need to do. Take action on those 2 steps, and then you'll figure out the rest. It'll just come. You can't figure out the entire thing from front to end at once. You got to just do the first 2 steps. Take action, and the rest will come.
When it came to those side hustles, when did you feel that you were succeeding at it?
It never felt like I was succeeding when it was a side hustle. I always felt like I was just kind of spinning my tires, or spinning my wheels. whatever the phrase is. And so I didn't really feel like I was having success until I was focused on it completely.
Why do you feel that?
Money mostly. I
Well,
mean, if it's a side hustle, I don't like to boil everything down just to money, but if it is a business, then that's really the stick that you're going to be measuring yourself with, is how much money are you making. And that, I mean, that's what it comes down to in business, is, are you making money? If not, then you're not running a very good business.
I feel like that's such a challenge with a lot of entrepreneurs and businesses, is they get to be so passionate about something, but then if you look at the financials and they're not making a profit, it's kind of like, how much longer can you do this?
Yeah.
And stuff. And I think I've always been that, where I like that financial security, but I also look at, does it make me happy? Do I get up in the morning and enjoy going to that work or doing those projects and things like that? If I'm not, I'm usually second guessing myself, and I'm like, okay, I got to go in a different direction, but how do I get there? Because obviously the job fields, it's not an easy area, because people are asking for ridiculous requirements and things like that. But I totally understand where you're coming from with the financial, because it's key. I mean, if you're not making money, you're going to have to go back and find a job that maybe that's not what you want to do. So I think a lot of people listening can definitely relate, and they can kind of be that on that same path right now listening, that they want to find that next path that they want to go on.
Yep, absolutely. And I do feel when people are thinking about, taking a leap and starting a business or whatever it is, they get caught up on the fact that they need to love it. And I don't subscribe to that model. I feel like once you become good at a thing and you're working with people that you enjoy, that is the happiness, like,
Yes.
thing there. It doesn't have to be. It's great if it is a pre-existing passion, but it doesn't have to be that. You can, once you become good at it and you see yourself having an impact on the people around you with your business, you're going to love it. That's just how it works. Doesn't matter what the business is. If you have an impact and you're good at it, you're going to love it. And you're working with cool people. That's very important.
I always say getting outside my comfort zone is usually the things I end up loving, because it challenges me in a way. I just remember I traveled to a different state to help out with my career, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is all new. Everyone's double my age. And like, but after I did that for a week, I'm like, I want to go back there. I want to do this again. Like, you just start wanting more and more and more. So exactly what you said, that until you do it and then you're falling in love with it. It's now, as you think about it, it's kind of like, oh, it makes sense now. But at that time, it does not.
Yeah. You got to push yourself through that initial fear. That's the crucial part.
If someone that's listening to this interview, when you said that you made that transition to entrepreneurship, what is the one thing that you want them to know that they have set out ready to go when they quit their job to going into that next step?
What's the one thing I want them to know when they make the transition?
Like, what's one piece of advice would you give them? You kind of said make sure the financials, but
yeah.
Setting it up, what should they have already planned out?
I think the most important part is, so, I mean, unless you're, curing cancer or something that hasn't been done already, somebody else has done what you're trying to do. And so there's a model out there. And so the most important thing is just find that model and find the person who made that model or who is currently working in that model, and just talk to them, learn from them. Because it'll cut down your mistakes 100-fold. It'll get you to that, in the black, making being a profitable business faster. So don't try to reinvent the wheel. It's already been done. You might think that your business is super special, which it is. It's your business, but it's been done before, guaranteed. And so somebody's out there can show you how to do it. Cut down your learning curve.
Now let's move on to talk about your real estate entrepreneurship journey. Is there a entrepreneur or an icon out there that you kind of look at and you're like, let me take a few things from them? kind of what we talked about, was there a mentor for you? Is there a mentor in this field that you kind of get inspired by?
I mean, there's a lot of guys that I have been following. You know, I haven't met them in like real life as a real, you know, mentor, but I followed them and I really like their philosophy, and it's kind of had an impact on the way I go forward. I mean, the first person I got to call out, I don't even know if he's still doing his stuff, but his name's Matt Tiriel. He's a flipper down in California, and that is the first course I bought. And you know, there are some gurus out there who sell shitty courses, but if you find a good one, it really does help. You know, if you're in a specific type of business and you find a course from somebody who's in that business, that can help a lot. And so I bought Matt Tiriel's course, and he did a good job putting that together. And so I learned a lot from that. So that was kind of the first mentor in real estate. And then after that, it's just been people I've met along the way, and you know, the big figures like Grant Cardone. He's you know, crushing it out there, and I follow him a lot. I've always liked Richard Branson. I feel like he's just lived an awesome life. And then this guy named Brian Johnson, who it's optimize.me, I think now. It's like a philosophy app. I've followed him a bunch, and I kind of liked his trajectory. So, you know, there's a bunch of icons or figures out there that I've followed and enjoyed their learning from them.
The only real estate people I know are the ones that are on TV. So I'm like
Chip and Dane or Chip and Joe.
Yeah, that show, never heard of them. And I had friends show me it, and I'm like, okay, this is entertaining in a weird way, because it's just them remodeling a house and stuff. But I'm like, okay. And I was in that time where I'm like, okay, I'm looking for a house. What do I like? What do I not like? And you get so inspired by these people. And I loved when they talk about like their personal lives. They talk about their journey to get there, because we see the big sales, the big marquees and things, but they've had a hard time to get there. Like Grant has probably had a journey to get to where he is, because I have a lot of people that they talk about that name, and I've only heard about him just from talking to people. And then I'm learning and researching. I'm like, okay, he's been on that path. So I love those.
Mm-hmm.
What has been your favorite task, project, things like that in your real estate journey?
My favorite
There could be multiples. I mean, I know I say one, but what has been your favorite?
Yeah, no, I mean, shoot, there's a ton of them. Let's think. So I recently switched focus. So I do mobile home parks now and self-storage facilities. So I bought a self-storage facility just recently, actually, down in Lubbock, Texas. And what I really like about real estate is that it is physical, and there is something like tangible that you're offering to society, and you know, you can see it. It's like a thing that you're putting out there and saying, hey, this is available for rent or whatever. And so I like buying really crappy properties and fixing them up and then renting them out. And so I bought this self-storage down in Lubbock, and it was the ugliest thing you've ever seen. But I saw the potential. It was in a good area. And so I fixed it up. I, you know, got security systems in there, gated it, painted it up, fixed all the issues. And now it looks like, you know, stellar. And so just seeing that transition, and it was in a really tight time frame. This was over the course of maybe 1 or 2 months.
Wow.
And, you know, seeing that quick transition was, it's always, you know, it's nice to see the end result.
Is it a challenge being so far away from that property, or do you have good communication with everything that's going on, that you're able to trust them to know what they need to get done while you are somewhere else?
It is a challenge. Yeah. So there's tons of ways to do real estate investing or real estate. And I do the out-of-state model. I live in Seattle, and, you know, properties here the cap rates are really low. And so I'm looking in markets where the cap rates aren't as compressed. And so I, you know, have to look out of my area. Texas, I love Texas. It is hard because you do have to create what's called boots on the ground. You have to create a team down there in order to work with them. But it's totally doable. You don't have to live in the state that you buy investment properties in. You can live wherever. I could live in Antarctica if I had good Wi-Fi signal.
You're crazy to think that you want to live
Not that
in
I'm going to.
Antarctica.
That sounds like a horrible life.
Oh, I had a friend that wants to go on like a iceberg boat trip or icebreaker, and I'm like, nope, too cold for me.
Yeah, no, I'll pass on that one.
What is there a location that is a dream for you to have properties in and kind of do that remodel for? Is there somewhere in the distance or on the plan for you?
Yeah. So me and my girlfriend really like Charleston. I don't know if you've been there, but
South Carolina?
Charleston, yeah, South Carolina.
Okay.
I love Charleston. The food is awesome. I love how old the buildings are. It's really nice. So I'm actually currently in conversation to buy a self-storage out in Columbia, which is about 2 hours away from Charleston. So I'm getting close to it. But it would be sweet to own something, in Charleston itself.
Are self-service storage facilities easy for you? Because it sounds like that's like the kind of theme going, or do you mix up the portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, I mix it up, but I like self-storage a lot. It's a great business, and it in the grand scheme of things, it's much easier to run because there's nobody living at your property, and
That's
you're
true.
literally just renting it out. I mean, I'm sure you've had a storage facility before. Like, how often do you go there? Maybe once every few months, and
Or if I remember that I have it.
right. So it's a relatively easy asset to manage, and I enjoy that.
What has been the biggest challenge in your journey right now with real estate?
I mean, the biggest challenge was getting over the hump. Real estate is expensive, and so you need to figure out a way to get over that hump in order to get in the game and own property. But once you do that, it becomes a lot easier. So right now, I'm kind of in the process of finalizing my operational processes, and then just expanding. So we're just trying to buy more properties and keep adding to the portfolio. And so I guess the hardest part right now is getting everybody in sync, and I feel like that might be the hardest part just throughout the career. But getting the team in sync, making sure everybody's on the same page, that kind of stuff.
Taking that model, even in the corporate world, they're still struggling with making sure everyone's in sync. So we all can relate on making sure a whole team is in sync, because I just said in sync, so I'm just going to go in that direction. Even bands and stuff, if they're not in sync, then it's just not going to work out. So the things I come up with.
That was good. That was a good transition.
As we mentioned earlier, you are a podcast host. Talk about how did you come up with the show, and what is the big mission and message that you're giving to the listeners?
Yeah, I mean, the show is called the Real Estate Investing Club because all we focus on is real estate investing. So that's the point of the show. And I specifically made it asset agnostic. So we don't focus specifically on single family, multifamily, commercial, whatever. We focus on everything. We'll have any type of guest on. The trajectory is I always like to start with stories, because I also like to hear, how people went from point A to point B, and it's never linear. That's what I love about it, is people always have the ups and downs. Doesn't matter who you're talking to, they're going to have ups and downs. So if you're in a down period right now, just know that you're going to have an up period. And so you just got to keep going. And that's what every guest who I've had on the show, that is their message, is that, they've gone through ups and downs, and they've come out the other side.
Has there been any guest that you've kind of listened to and you can relate to their story, or you can find something that you might have gone through something similar with?
I mean, there's been a bunch of guests who've been on, and they just talk about being broke and trying to do real estate. And I'm like, dude, I was there. I feel you. And so not having money sucks. And so, especially when you're trying to do something that's very capital intensive. And so I remember being in that moment, and I always relate to those people.
Is there a dream guest that you're hoping? I maybe can figure out one guest that you might want on there, or maybe a couple that we've talked about, but is there a dream guest that you would like to have on your show to learn more about their story, so everyone can hear the story?
Yeah, I mean, I know Grant Cardone's story, but it would be pretty sweet to have him on. So Grant, if you're out there listening, come on, join the Real Estate Investing Club. We'd love to have you on. So Grant, obviously, and then So Robert Kiyosaki wrote a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad. It kind of gets a lot of people started down the path of into real estate. It'd be great to have him on. And then, some pretty much anybody in the self-storage space. I haven't had a lot of self-storage guys on the podcast, and it'd be fun to have them on.
That would be a good one because it definitely relates to what you like also. So it's definitely do. Do you think that there's another side hustle out there that's kind of waiting for you to kind of find, or you are good with where you're at right now?
It's not a side hustle, but I've been saying this for I don't know how many years to my girlfriend, to my family. I want to start a car wash, one of those auto car washes. I don't know why. I just love those things, and it would be fun to own one. So that or a recycling plant. Those are two, like, for some reason, those businesses just seem badass to me. Owning a car wash or a recycling plant.
In my town, it seems like a car wash place pops up. We're going to knock down this building. What are they putting up? A car wash. And there's maybe 5 car washes in like a street. What excites you about a car wash? Like, I'm so fascinated about this now. Like, what brings you to want? Is it the money that you can make off of it, or the business?
Well, yeah, I mean, so they are from the very practical side. They have good profit margins, so I've heard, and they're not employee intensive, so you can run them with very few employees, which is great. On the other side, on the non-practical side, I've just always liked car washes. I love going through them. There's something about a car wash that I just really enjoy, and so I just feel like it'd be fun to own one.
Add that to the list of guests. Someone that owns a bunch of car washes.
There you go.
There we
go.
You go. Looking at your journey so far, we kind of talked about it, that your path has gotten you to where you are. Are you still thinking that, or is there something that you might have changed to get to where a different place in your life?
Is there something that I might have changed?
We always look back at, we kind of talked about this earlier, like, oh, would you go back to college and change how you went? Or do you feel that each step that you take, you've learned so much about yourself that you're happy that the path you took got you to where you are today?
Yeah. I mean, again, hindsight's 2020, but I think the only thing that I would change is to slow down, because, especially when I was in corporate and I was just desperate to get out of that life, I was going a mile a minute, and when you're going that fast and you're pushing so hard, you don't make good decisions. You're not there. You're not present in your relationships. So it would have been great if I just slowed down a bit and just chilled out. Mm-hmm. But again, hindsight's 2020. So who knows?
Looking towards the future, what are you hoping to accomplish in the next few years, personally and professionally?
Okay. So, I mean, professionally, I just keep going down the path I'm on. So this year we want to do 100,000 square feet of self-storage. And maybe in the next few years, I've always wanted to do strip center retail. And so I'd like to do one of those. Personally, I mean, I'm a big into fitness. I don't really have a goal per se, but I just really, well, actually, no, that's not true. I do have a goal. Recently I've been talking with my friends. We hiked Mount Rainier up here in Washington probably like 10 years back, actually. But we've been talking about wanting to hike another mountain. So we're thinking about Adams or Hood. And so that's the goal, is hike one of those bad boys.
Are those mountains in Washington?
Yeah. And they're not super difficult, but we're getting older. So I feel like it's still going to be a challenge.
It's not like you're just trying to go up Mount Everest or something, or the Swiss Alps or something, things like that. The final question I'll ask you, for someone that's listening to this interview based on your journey and experience, what tips or advice would you give them to overcome obstacles, accomplish their goals, and rise to the challenge?
Oh man, best tip I would give is just pick a goal and stick to it. And just don't give up, because obstacles are going to come up. You're going to feel like you're not making it. You're going to feel like you're a failure. You feel like everything is crumbling around you. But if you just keep going, it's going to work out. So choose your goal and put the effort in, and don't give up.
Well, Gabe, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your rise to the challenge. You're inspiring so many people, and we're excited to see what the future looks like for you.
Right on, Alex. Well, thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure.